Hey folks, we're back. I'm your host, BKP. Good morning from the office. North Georgia's only live online morning show. That being said, Josh, show the folks out there the information. This is how you can contact me. Yeah, I'm getting ready to play an interview that I feel several of you may want to send me a message. You may want to come on and discuss the information and that we're about to share, and we put that on the screen. Now, I'm not going to take a lot of time here. I just want to set this up. We're getting ready to play our interview with Derek Somerville. Now, back in the beginning, in the middle of the legislative session of this year, somewhere around the middle, David Clarke, Representative David Clarke, asked for Georgia House Speaker David Ralston's resignation through a resolution. 9 other representatives signed it. I think that's it for now. I think it's got 9 or 10 signatures. I'm not for sure, but those are the original signatures. And that being said, they claim their reasons for asking for Speaker Ralston's resignation is the alleged legislative leave abuse, the claim that he abused the state law of legislative leave in his law practice, stalling cases for years that did not get into court. Now, that being said, private citizen says he has no political aspirations. Former FBI Special Agent Derek Somerville took it on himself, and you will hear that in the interview, to go to courthouses and research cases. Research all kinds of cases. And he has binders and stacks. And I have all the information. He gave it to me. I've read through as much as I could in a couple days. And he has binders and stacks of legislative leave requests by Speaker David Ralston. Now, we went through so many documents yesterday, Mr. Somerville and myself, and we had a very good, intense conversation. And let me tell you where I'm coming from before we start on the interview so you will know. I'm not an activist. I'm not a defense attorney. I'm not a lawyer. But what really troubled me, not so much with Mr. Somerville, but what has really troubled me through this whole thing is people that, under the guise of a watchdog that puts up a website, Ralston resign or whatever, under the guise of call themselves a watchdog, okay? Big media companies, big newspaper companies, massive companies that have very deep pockets that they could spend investigating, okay? And if I've heard once, I keep hearing the victims. And I will look at the camera, and I'm not going to make that judgment about Mr. Somerville, but I will look at the camera and I will tell you the politicians, the supposed watchdogs, the supposed citizen journalists, and the big media, if they tell me one more time they care about the victims, it's not true. This is a politically motivated attempt to remove the Speaker of the House of Georgia. Now, I'm not saying I'm okay with that, but I'm okay with you wanting to do that. Just say that's what you want to do. Don't do it under the guise of trying to tell us out here in Georgia that you're doing it because you care about the victims. Folks, Amanda Moser's case, we've highlighted that for years. So it's not a caring about the victims as they would try to lead you to believe their reasoning is. The other thing is, I wish all these watchdogs would really dig into the circuits, the judicial circuits of Georgia, and see the piled up cases by the thousands that are overwhelming every circuit. I've had a couple attorneys, and leave it at that, tell me they're kindly, hey, I have as many cases as David Ralston that have been delayed as long as, not more than Ralston's, for one reason after another. So all I really get into with Mr. Somerville is a look into rural judicial circuits. Because one thing I never heard reported, and I agree when you hear the interview with Mr. Somerville, but I never heard reported, and I'll just pick out one thing. I never heard reported about the null pros that, hey, there were several that belonged to attorney David Ralston. Folks, thousands have been dismissed because the former district attorney in the Appalachian Judicial Circuit did not get off his ass and do any work. He never tried one case. So when you start looking at the flow chart and you look at 2012, on January 1st, 2013, this district here in question swore in a new district attorney with 55 or 5,800 cases on the books. They weren't all David Ralston's. And this district attorney had to take 2 years and filter through all the cases of misdemeanors that could not be heard and null pros them, meaning saying, I can't take them to court. And I'm going to throw out that it's hundreds. And that took almost 3, and it's not done. And I'm not saying a negative thing because it's not, but anyhow, nothing was ever challenged in this reporting. And it's not Mr. Somerville. It's the big watchdogs, folks. The big watchdogs in Atlanta that got all the money. They can tell you these things. Mr. Somerville's he's a very nice guy. He did a great job of his investigation. But there's one other thing I wanted to bring up. And we'll get to this. And I want to say that for all the people that are out there passing judgment on our district here in North Georgia. I just absolutely love that. One person went on there and posted and basically called us a basket of deplorables up here. And that wasn't the quote, but that was from one opinion, somebody writing an opinion. And, I want to say something here. And I haven't mentioned anybody's names, I know who they are, but in all the investigating where they run around the halls of the Capitol, right? They all run around the halls of the Capitol and they get a microphone and they go after Speaker Ralston here and they go after this one for the questioning. Maybe they have visited our little district up here, okay, in question for the most part. That's Pickens, Fannin, and Gilmer. I've never heard anybody explain a priority calendar. So I'm going to do that and go to the interview, as promised. What is a priority calendar? A priority calendar means jail cases go first. Why? Because it costs the county jail $35 to $45 per inmate. Okay? $35 to $45 per inmate. And if the county jails are not emptied out, you have probably a sheriff in that county that's going to the court and saying, you got to get them out of my jail. It's costing my budget a fortune. See, there's no reimbursement from the state for county jail. And it's the bottom line on what's called the priority calendar. County jail goes first. Okay? Bottom line. Demand cases are second if you demand a speedy trial. Okay? Prioritize non-jail. So if you get out on bond, this is the third level. If you get out on bond, you've done something wrong. The priority is, that's the third level of priority, is out on bond, felony cases, murder, rape, but you're out on bond. That's the third level. Child molestation and child molestation. Lesser felonies, misdemeanors, DUI, family violence, Sadly, the misdemeanors come last on the calendar. So the only thing that was left out, and you'll hear Mr. Somerville say that some of my notes don't bear out, and I'm not going to disagree with him on that. I just am going to say there are thousands of cases, and when any attorney puts in for any reason to not be on a calendar for court, it doesn't mean that the attorney was even going to be on the calendar that day, because these calendars are moved on a daily basis. Because what I would really like, if you're out there and you call yourself a watchdog, all right, it costs a whole lot of money. All right? And I don't want to go in another area, but we can go around on election time and we could talk about, what can we talk about? We could talk about giving people raises. Right? Oh, yes, we're going to give this group a raise, and we're going to give that group a raise, and this group a raise. And everybody cheers and applauds, right? And then we come up with a $27.5 billion budget. I actually really like the men and women that work in so many of these small rural county judicial circuits. When you meet them, they're a great group of people. But these small rural judicial circuits, there's so many in the state that need one or two more judges. Period. All right? Bottom line. Because what we're not really talking about here, and I agree there's a group, and if you can keep going, and if you're not happy with Speaker of the House, David Ralston, and you think judicial leave, that legislative leave has been abused, and you want to argue that, have at it. But if you truly care for the victims in Georgia, as you say you do, and you truly care about right and wrong, as you say you do, you should investigate and look. And my personal opinion, and this is not a direct attack on any judge, none. But you should look and see at the backlog and the mess we have in our judicial system. Folks, you're not going to agree, but the President of the United States is asking for 100 new judges to try to process what's happening at the border that takes 5 and 6 years. There's people that come across the border, they're released because we don't have the system to handle it. And it takes 5, 6 years and they don't show back up for court. So let me say to you, this is not just Georgia, it's all over the United States. But Georgia, there's a reason that these cases are taking 4, 5, 6, 10, 12 years. And it's not all legislative leave by David Ralston. That's all I'm saying. So I'm not alleviating your right to decide how you feel about Speaker of the House and legislative leave. Just look at the whole thing if you're going to. Now, I can't say enough of how much I enjoyed meeting this man. I can't say enough. I can't say enough of how much I enjoyed spending time with him. After the interview, he stuck around and we had a great conversation. And I think you'll enjoy this interview. It gets intense at times, but never heated, because we realized we were digging. And I think there was a point, you're going to watch in the interview, where I think he realizes, and I'll say that, and I realize that we're both digging, okay, in something that can have a good outcome if it's handled right. So here you go, my interview with former FBI Special Agent Derek Somerville. Hey, joining us now, former FBI Special Agent Derek Somerville. Derek, how are you today?
Doing well, thank you.
Thank you for driving all the way up to LJ, Georgia, okay, and sitting down in studio. But this is not your first trip to LJ, Georgia. You've been over here to the Gilmer County Courthouse. We're going to talk about that in a minute. And you visited up to 8 courthouses. Is that what I remember in
That's
the press?
correct.
Okay, let me just set this up for you. Mr. Somerville has been researching courthouses and Georgia House Speaker David Ralston's alleged abuse of legislative leave, where this past session, House Representative David Clarke authored a resolution that I think 9 other representatives signed on to, asking for Speaker Ralston's resignation in the Georgia House. Before we get into that, let me ask you a question, okay? A couple getting to know you.
Sure.
I watched your press conference last Wednesday in Atlanta, where you've done extensive research, and we're going to get into that research in just a minute. And you don't have all the charts and graphs with you today, so respectfully let the audience know you're going to recollect from memory of what you discussed last Wednesday. But you said something. You met David Clarke, Representative Clarke, on the campaign trail with Brian Kemp.
Correct.
You did not know him before that, or you just bumped into him on the campaign trail at that time?
David Clarke was the chairman of the Veterans Coalition for Brian Kemp's campaign. And so the first time I had met David was in connection to veterans supporting Brian Kemp. Prior to this event, I had been in a room once with him, and it was in connection to that. It was a group of veterans discussing Brian Kemp's candidacy. So I don't know him personally. We've never been to each other's homes. When I learned about the position he was taking on the legislative leave and the use of it, I had reached out to him at that point because I thought that he was taking a pretty courageous step all in, but that was very early in. Prior to that, we'd only been in the meeting in that one space or that one room that one time.
All right, so let me ask you this. Your words, not mine, folks, veterans. You're a former Marine. I told you a Marine once a Marine. Tell our audience why you say former Marine.
Well, I get corrected on it by non-Marines, but Marines get this, and that is that every time I go and work out and run, I feel like a former Marine. But,
okay, so and again, while you're here, thank you for your service. We always like to say that.
I appreciate that.
Okay, so for our audience that watched last Wednesday, this is a couple questions. We want to give you an opportunity to clear up. You drove to 8 different courthouses. We'll get into that. You spent, what I'd like for you to answer now is how much time you spent doing that. Mm-hmm. And is this 100% out of your pocket? Is you not taking gas money, whatever? Answer that question, because that has come up. Who is paying you or who is helping with expenses?
Right.
Talk about that first.
First off, it's 100% out of my pocket, period. Not a nickel, not a dime, not a penny. I read one of the remarks that stated whoever paid this guy should get their money back. I paid this guy. This was 100% on my own, and it wasn't inexpensive. There was a lot of miles to be covered, and we'll talk about that. There was a lot of documentation, some 1,600 pages that had to be copied and duplicated and scanned.
Because they charge a dime, quarter,
50 cents per page.
Yeah, so you pick. I watched, and not to interrupt you, I watched you with binder after binder.
Yeah.
And you paid for all of those copies.
Yep.
Okay, I get
100%.
it. All right. I just want to give you an opportunity to talk about that because, as you well know, people have questioned that, right?
Yeah, and they should question it. And I understand in today's environment why people do question it. One of the things, and I know you've got a path you want to follow, but I both expected, but I also, I guess, didn't expect how difficult it is for people to accept that your motive might actually not be what they think your motive is.
I understand very well.
And I suspect in your business you encounter this from time to time. The fact of the matter is, and you're probably going to ask about this, but I initially went and looked into this just because I didn't simply believe that it was a legal option for someone to exercise legislative continuance outside of a session. And the reporting in the crimes, and they, of course, picked crimes that were particularly passionate, everyone's going to be passionate about, made me want to look closer, which was what brought me to Gilmer the first time. I just came up to Gilmer to look at the case files. the reason this took the path that it did is there was so much more there, if you will. And so going into it, I had no idea that it was going to be 1,000 of these. I didn't know there'd be 1,700 pages. I drove hundreds of miles to all of these different courthouses. And of course, as you know, I live a solid hour and a half south of here. One of those trips, I was in Gulf Shores with my family over spring break and had some work I realized I'd missed because I took all those binders that you saw. I had them all laid out in where we were staying on spring break. And I realized I had a big gap that I needed to fill here in Gilmer. And I drove from the ocean all the way back up here and spent 2 days up here while they were on vacation so that I could finish that, and then headed all the way back down to the ocean, finished the vacation with them, and drove all the way back here. So
let's back up just a little bit for our viewers. Again, and the reason I have to bring this up, and I think you understand, is to allow the viewers to decide, because you're not a politician. I'll let you discuss that. But Representative David Clarke is a politician, right. And he originally started this story. Is he the originator of the story that you watched? I know you brought up that you, Johnny Edwards and Tony Thomas of WSB. Yeah. Tell us a little bit of what happened. You watching the news, read an article, and that's what happened?
Exactly.
To get you interested. Tell us about what was in those stories that made you so interested in this case.
Yeah, so David Clarke was after the fact. I had, and I don't remember which order it was. It was either Johnny or Edwards or Tony Thomas's WSB somewhere, because I think they worked together on this one. But somehow that had crossed my path. I don't know if it was online or where. And obviously they went to the cases that involved both Jadon Carpenter being assaulted and then 2 of the child molestation and rape cases. And so at that point in time, I hadn't talked to David Clarke since during the campaign period. And again, it was a very incidental amount of time that we spent with each other. So I had no idea that he or anybody was interested in what was happening. And that story got me, it upset me enough to make me want to look closer. And I actually reached out and actually sent an email to Johnny Edwards at the time, who I'd never met him before. And I sent him an email and said this is powerful reporting. I'd like to understand more. Is there more, effectively, something to that effect? And how do you learn more about this? And one way or the other, I found out that the public, or the records that this reporting was, and they were polite, but I'm just another person that reaches out to them when they do a story, and I'd never done that before. And so they kind of informed me, hey, these are public records, you should go look for yourself. And so that's what I did. When did you contact David Clarke? Because let me get, and from recollection, you and I both are going to agree that we're going to do some of this from memory. And if memory serves me, story came out. David Clarke then put a resolution. Now there's a timeline in place where 9 others, when signed on, representatives asking Speaker Ralston to resign. And then obviously the story caught a lot of fire. When did you make connection with David Clarke in that, and did you make connection when you saw that he put a resolution asking him to resign? How did that go? Best that I can recall. So because not to interrupt you, but and I know I did. I'm sorry, sir. But what I'm saying is, it's apparent to me that you and Mr. Clarke now have a closer relationship where you communicate. Correct? Yeah. And one more question, and I'll let you go on that. Are you in Mr. Clarke's district? No. Okay, go ahead. No, fair enough. Okay. Prior to this, and I don't know what the most artful way to say this, but David Clarke was not part of any of my activities, right? So prior to this, I had no reason to be in contact with David Clarke. He's not in my district. We had sat in a room once together, and even then he was leading a meeting and I was sitting in it. So we didn't have a whole lot of interaction. I learned that David had taken a public stand on it, and my memory could be mistaken, but I thought he took a public stand before he dropped the resolution, because I feel like I reached out after he took a public stand and said, hey, this is good that you're taking a stand. This is something we need to understand better. Keep doing whatever it is you're doing. Let's find out what this is all about. Because at the time, I think a lot of us were trying to understand what precisely is this. And I feel like that took place prior to the resolution, if I'm not mistaken. But that whole period happened very fast. So I assumed, and you may have the actual timeline, that I may have literally spoken to him the day before, because I remember when the resolution dropped, I found out when everybody else did, and of course I followed back up with him. But there was, at that point we were on completely divergent paths, and I was just another citizen, frankly, trying to figure out what this was.
All right, now let me go not to the end, but let me go to the end of close to the end of your press conference last Wednesday. You have asked, especially Wednesday, you did ask for the resignation of Speaker David Ralston. Am I correct?
I did.
Okay. Now I want to go from the back. I want to go now back to the front. David Clarke, Representative Clarke, has admittedly on camera he's not an attorney. Mm-hmm. I'm not an attorney. I probably should have told you that, because I'm not an attorney. Okay.
And I'm not an attorney.
Well, I'm going to give you your quote, okay? Because I'm using your quote. Actually, this quote with you is what led me to look closer, because I heard you say this, and I really felt you were saying out there to people like me looking, hey, look at this closer and tell me. And this is your quote, and tell me if I'm wrong, from recollection. I'm not a lawyer. I have no expertise with legal proceedings. And as such, I encourage those who do to review this information. It's very possible I missed something.
Absolutely.
So you said that, right?
That sounds correct.
Then we go on to 279 cases, 1,091 legislative leave, 137 civil, 142 of them criminal, 99 cases, or 966 legislative leaves since Speaker Ralston Ralston became Speaker of the House. And what I did, is I pulled a couple of these. So how about this? And as I told you when we started, how about this? I'm going to bring a couple of these charts up.
Okay.
All right. A couple of these issues and charts up. They are from your presentation. So just for our audience, just validate when I give you one, it's from the presentation. And I picked three. Now, what I want to say right now is if for any reason you want to bring up any others, because there's many others that you brought up in details, I want you to feel comfortable in doing that. But I want to go with, the Contempt of Court.
Okay.
All right, and that's the only one, that you got like 5 or 6 sheets, and I'm not leaving anything out, but I brought this Contempt of Court, and I think that's concerning what was Judge George Stanley Gunter, right?
Gunter in Towns County, I believe.
Towns County, okay. And this is where Speaker Ralston was possibly going to be jailed, is what you said.
Well, it was part of the contempt order.
Right,
He had 10 days to comply, and if he didn't, arrest warrants would be issued for he and his client.
Okay. Tell me about this case, the Contempt of Court. Why you used that one in your presentation, why you highlighted that one. Tell our audience a little bit about Speaker Ralston and this case here.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'll leave defendants and plaintiffs, the names out of it, as I did in my presentation, if that's okay. But in this case, and I should have, I hope I kept all that redacted out of that documentation.
I'm pretty sure you did.
The reason I went with this case was because one of the comments that the speaker had said is nobody had ever, and I don't know his exact words, but no judge and no defense attorney had ever pushed back on his use of legislative leave. And he might have even said my need for legislative leave. And I found that out of concert with the results that I found, in that it felt as if we were parsing language in order to fill a narrative that wasn't lining up with what I found. And what the contempt of court was just a judge actually ordering in favor for an opposing counsel's objection to what Ralston was doing. But there were several other opposing counsel in several other cases in several other counties that were also appealing to the court and asking the court to make this stop, telling the court this is prejudicing the results against my client, telling the court that that I'm never going to get into court if this continues. And so what Judge Gunter did in Towns County is what so many other judges didn't. And he actually said, you know what, I'm going to rule in favor of this motion of contempt that was filed by the attorney in this case. There was another motion for contempt, by the way, that I'm not sure I mentioned in my presentation. But so there was another motion for contempt filed against the Speaker that did not get a favorable ruling from the judge, but the circumstances were almost identical in all of them.
But in the contempt of court paperwork, he was actually never put in jail.
Oh, no. And I hope no one...
Well, I understand that. Are you aware that case was settled?
Yes, yeah.
You're aware of
Yeah.
that? You didn't mention that the other day.
It wasn't relevant to the point I was making here.
Okay, but what I'm saying is it's not for me to say, but I actually witnessed one attorney getting called into contempt and actually going to jail on the same day. So I'm not going to say it's usual, but what I'm saying is on this case, you don't know 100% the reason that the attorney, which being Ralston, could not get the discovery the judge in Rigolo, is that his name?
I
attorney.
believe so.
I think it's Attorney Thompson. Richelo, right?
Right.
So, but you don't know.
Well, I have the Speaker's own words in his own letters to the attorney explaining why he couldn't get it to him.
Yeah, I understand,
Right.
but that case did get settled.
So what happened is after 2.5 years of
Right.
no responses, according to the sworn affidavit from Richelo, he finally did get a response from the Speaker. The Speaker in that, I'm paraphrasing, apologized, proposed, because ultimately, if you appeal it just a little bit, as I understand that file, and I read it several times, the attorney had made a motion had made a discovery request. That discovery request went completely unresponded to. Eventually, he went back to the court, and there might have been a communication in there at one point or another with the Speaker. But then he went back to the court and filed for a motion to compel, asking the court to compel him to respond. I believe the Speaker responded to the motion to compel and made commitments, but then ultimately didn't meet that commitment. So he said, we'll have it to you by this date. That day came and went. In a letter, the Speaker said, hey, it was the day before I think it was due. Other issues have surfaced, other conflicts have surfaced. I now need to be out of town, but if you'll allow, I'll have this to you by this another date. He picked that other date. That day came and went. And when that day came and went, I believe is when Mr. Richelo filed the contempt order, and the judge agreed and then issued the contempt order, which, as you know, required them to pay the attorney fees associated with those motions. There was a civil penalty if they didn't respond, and then if they had 10 days to respond, he and his client, or they would be subject to arrest until such time as it was satisfied. And as I understand how it ultimately transpired is the discovery, the fines were paid, the discovery, and I was satisfied, but none of that was in the case file. So
Yeah,
that's
well,
what
I understand it wasn't in the case file. The one thing when I say when you say legislative leave, I agree. Don't want to disregard. I looked at the work that you. Maybe I wish you'd have brought a couple binders, because for our audience to see, you did an amazing amount of work. Okay,
Sure.
But we're both not attorneys. That case was settled. It may have been settled to both parties' satisfaction. We're not aware of that.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, I'm aware of how that case was disposed of. I mean, it was settled.
Right.
There was a judgment. Judgment was, the first thing I would say, let me back up. You don't need to be an attorney to look at a date. You don't need to be an attorney to look at a signature, right? You can read this, and we know what transpired here. The individuals had been awarded judgment from the onset. So there was a summary judgment that was issued, and that amount was to be paid. And I think it was the magnitude of $40-something thousand that was supposed to be paid.
Right, and there was a dispute. I know the case.
Yeah.
I know the case, and when you brought it up, I made sure I looked some things over on it.
Yeah.
And I do know it's been settled. And I can't say that legislative leave did not play a role. I can't say that, but maybe there's some outside circumstances other than legislative leave that were involved in that case, and it was settled.
And
I guess I think I would have said, but the case has been settled.
Yeah.
So maybe your point was just making that case.
Well,
and
no.
what happened there with the judge.
My point was and there was nothing over 2.5 years that precluded him from sending an email. Nothing. There was nothing that kept him for 24 months or 26 or 30 months from not returning a phone call. That scenario doesn't exist if you're alive and you're walking. And when you read both what the attorney in this case wrote to the judge and what he swore in the affidavit, and then when you read what Speaker Ralston responded with, Speaker Ralston, in his own words, and you've read it, said, well, as you know, I have many other obligations. I'm in my law office very infrequently, right?
Absolutely.
So I think we can all put that one together, what those other obligations are, because there's 1,000 examples where he said, I can't do these things to these other obligations. And those are the examples where I don't think the public cares much for when we go, well, we're going to pick these words and make them fit.
Oh,
and you're not
agree.
doing this. But
no, I agree with you.
And the reason I put this is because here was a case where an attorney was going, and a client was saying, listen, we've already been awarded this case. It's 2.5 years. And the actual language, I think, was the effect of, well, he's not returned a call, responded to email, I've heard nothing. And when he did, I think what the attorney in there said is he broke a 2-year silence or something to that effect. And so what this case for me was, and I didn't seek out any one case, and so we should address that in a minute.
No, I understand.
But it just kind of laid out that, it's probably disingenuine to say that nobody took exception to this and that no court had to intervene, because if I just finish, what's unclear to me is, or anybody for that matter, because we don't know, would that case still be delayed if that motion for contempt wasn't ultimately filed? Because it didn't look like there was any possible pattern that it was going to ever actually, that they would even get a return phone call.
Well, I guess what I would say is how many cases, how many times in the last year, and I know people are going to say, really, I'm saying this, has there been an attorney that has been told by a judge they're going to be in contempt, he's going to throw them in jail, he or she's going to throw them in jail if they don't reach discovery in this amount of time, and you and I don't know what the situation is, that they've used some other means of delay for their client. So I'm not saying that. All I wanted to get out in this case is, I understand the reasons. You are accurate with the legislative leaves. They're in black and white. They're out there. You have them. I have them on a thumb drive. People can see them if they want. Yep. You're accurate with that. Maybe not the first attorney that's been threatened by the judge.
So before, and I went into this. I reached out. I have a number of attorneys, and I've obviously got a lot of friends that are attorneys. And I reached out. and I said, how common is it to be found in contempt? Now, threatened with contempt by court is one thing. But the idea that to actually have a court rule that you are in contempt of that court, I think is actually a very rare thing. The gentleman that I've spoke to, several different attorneys that are 30-year attorneys, say, never in my career have I ever been held in contempt. Now, you might skirt up against that line, but I would be fascinated to hear from the state bar or anybody else that can tell us, right? Because I don't think it is that common.
I'm not going to make a case that's that common. I'm not here to make a case.
Right.
I don't want to make a case that's that common. I just don't think he's the first attorney that was held in contempt.
I'd venture to say he's the first Speaker of the House to be held in contempt.
But that's not against the law to be Speaker in the House and an attorney. Now, that's another issue in itself.
Yep.
Do people not want him to be an attorney or not want to be Speaker of the House?
Yeah.
So let's move on to something else, okay? Because
Sure.
I pulled several, okay? Mm-hmm. And you had an opportunity to handle that one. These two here I pulled, okay? And tell the audience what these are and why you use these in your PowerPoint. And you probably will remember them very clear.
Yeah, so what these are 2 examples coming out of, and I don't know if I can see that on here. My eyes, my former Marine eyes aren't what they used to be, but
one's from Fannin, one's from Gilmer.
Gilmer.
This one is a null pros dismissal, and this one I think is 5.
Yep.
5 on the same day, null pros.
Right. So these are decisions by the prosecuting authority in these respective areas to discontinue the prosecution of these cases.
Right.
Right. And what I did is on the March 4th ones, and these are and again, I can't see the print.
Are those the what?
Are these Gilmer?
Yeah, one is Fannin and one is Gilmer.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I should have brought my glasses.
That's okay.
This is Fannin.
Fannin.
So In each of these cases, these are, and I found other drop prosecution cases of his. There's several out there. That is totally, absolutely something that happens on some level with all criminal attorneys, I'm assuming. The reason I pulled these is in all 6 of these, they cited the passage of time. The first one that I actually came across was the Noel Pross here in Fannin County, where the DA made the statement that the Constitution demands it. And what struck me with that was then, well, how many others are out there, and they're not drop prosecutions for a lack of evidence, or they're not drop prosecution because the law enforcement officer involved, failed to read Miranda or failed to have a chain of custody on evidence. It was all specifically cited in all 6 of these that the reason why these were dropped is because of the passage of time. And of course, the ones from Gilmer actually explain how the passage of that time erodes memories and witness recollection becomes stale, I think is what one of them read. So that's why I brought those up to point out that, and in this case with those 5, we'll come back to that maybe in a minute, 4 of those were DUIs. So 4 DUIs, and then 1 is a disorderly with an obstructing police officers. And so one of the things that I found interesting when I looked at these, but I didn't share this in the presentation, was there's a very high percentage of his DUIs that don't make it through the prosecutorial mesh, if you will. I live in a county where if you get a DUI, if you get pulled over for DUI, they're not going to drop the prosecution on that. And so that's the story behind these.
All right, this is in 2005, right?
2015.
15, I mean. And they date back 6 years, was that?
I don't know off the top of my head, but they ranged in age. I think
like 2010 is when they started, is that?
Well, these are separate cases. They averaged 4.5 years or so.
4.5 to more, 4.5 years. And this one here is a Noel Pross. Now, let me ask you a question.
And this was a misdemeanor drug possession charge.
Okay.
That was about 5 years old.
I don't know if any DUIs are misdemeanors, but let me ask this question, all right? And I want to ask this respectfully, because when I look at this, and I looked at the dates, okay, of this, do you know one? First of all, we're in a rural area, okay? So for those out there, I keep hearing the Atlanta media and what I call self-promoters that are all over this and actually showing, to me, joy. Not yourself, sir. Others.
Yeah, this is anything but enjoyable.
Right, I got it. But here's what I'm looking at is I have sent some of them messages and said, hey, when is the last time you came and sat through the Appalachian Judicial District,
right,
rural Judicial District Circuit, which this one is Pickens County, Gilmer, and Fannin. Okay? So let me ask you a question, okay? And I would ask the others if they would come talk.
Sure.
Do you know what the priority calendar is in a judicial district? Do you know what that is?
Yeah, I made myself vaguely familiar with it on the impact, as I understand it, and I haven't memorized it. I did pull down the calendars too, because I wanted to understand the narrative that, well, there's only 2 weeks out of the, you keep hearing these different statements that there's only this finite period.
Right. Every judge sets their own priority count.
And then I understand factors such as, is there somebody that's currently remanded has an impact, the nature of the crime, and these lesser crimes tend to get pushed down to the bottom of the pile and then they wind up getting deferred. So I do understand that. I don't have the process memorized.
What I'm saying is, I want to explain, I want to talk about these, and I don't want you to misunderstand. You just happen to be the one here that did the work. These are Noel Pross. The district attorney has gone through these and has decided there's no way they could spend the citizens' tax money to prosecute. As you said, they're too old.
Right.
Things are missing. Witnesses no longer live here, regardless of what it is.
Yeah, they never said anything was missing in here.
No.
Yeah.
I'm just saying in general. Okay? Because you brought 2 instances.
Well, I brought 6 instances.
5, 1.
These are all individual cases.
Right. 5 and 1. Okay.
Right.
Jail cases go first.
Okay.
They always go first. Okay? Jail cases go first, and let me explain. This is not a matter of disrespect. This is just something that I think.
Absolutely.
Jail cases go first. You know why? Because it costs $35 to $45 a day to house inmates in rural counties, and the jail cases come out before a judge first to get that off the county's books. This is not reimbursement from the state. Not at all. Comes from me, the citizen in this district. Okay. Second is demand cases, the right for a speedy trial. So if you have a demand case where somebody has asked for a speedy trial, right? Yep. And if you find any of those cases, okay, then it's prioritized by non-jail.
Right.
Okay. That's people that are out on bond.
Yep.
They get to go third. Felony cases in non-jail, murder, rape, child molestation, okay, but that's third. Lesser felonies, forgeries, whatever it may be,
right,
check cashing over an amount, and then misdemeanor, DUI, family violence is what goes last in usually the priority line. Now, all I want to tell you is, let me ask you this. What is this right here? Because you brought these up. Tell the folks everything I'm discussing is on your PowerPoint, right? So what is this right here? What is that graph? And we're sorry we don't have it up for you, and maybe we'll provide the graph for you. We apologize.
Yeah, so what this graph does is it provides the total number of continuances in each given year that I was able to find and record. Correct.
Okay. And what this shows right here.
And then it breaks out between in session versus out of session.
In session versus out of session.
Correct.
Now you need to understand, I'm not here to defend in session, out of session, legislative leave, but here's what I want to say when you've got, now this one here shows active criminal cases, right?
Yep. Yeah, and this is based on what the computer systems say. So I don't know the integrity of the computer systems, but I'm assuming it's reasonably accurate.
Okay.
Because that's what the computer systems indicated were active.
Okay, so these are active cases, and let me ask you where I'm wrong here. These go back to 2008, and these are still active? Is that what you're telling me? Those are still active?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a DUI case that's over 10 years or right at 10 years at this point, so that would be correct.
Okay, and they're still lingering out there?
They still are lingering out there.
Now,
per the court records.
Actually, I think when I say this, I know what you're saying. When you go pull court records, they're only as accurate as what's on the system.
Yeah, or what's in the jacket too.
Exactly.
So we should come back to that because it is.
I'm going to agree to the best of your ability to put this out. This is accurate. I'm going to agree with you. Your information is accurate. Here's the only thing, and the reason I want to say this is because I wish you would have went a couple more steps, because right here, okay, right here in 2010,
correct,
right here, he becomes Speaker of the House.
Correct.
Okay, and then 11 and 12, okay, and 12 is the biggest year, 164, he's up 76%, 164 continuances, right?
Right.
Okay. Now, I'm going to say I don't know if this is relevant. I do know it's relevant in our court system because I sit in our court system. I go watch cases all the time.
Right.
Okay? And I can't... You know what that year is? That's the year when this district decided that the former district attorney was not doing their job.
Okay.
And the new district attorney got sworn in here. Okay?
Yep.
Got sworn in here. That's when we got a new district attorney. Is January 1st, 2013.
Okay.
When the new district attorney took over, the new district attorney was handed almost 5,800, give or take 100, 5,800 cases from the former DA that wouldn't, my opinion as a voter here, wouldn't do anything, okay? Mm-hmm. Now I'm going to turn this over to you in a minute. So right here, it takes, and I would like for you to go check this out, in a rural county, if you've got 5,800 cases and you've got a handful of assistant district attorneys, sure, it takes almost 2 years to sort through those cases to see which ones to null pros. And this district attorney, the only way to get the caseload down, had to take 2 years of review, because it wasn't Ralston that caused me to look at this. I've been looking at this for years.
Right.
It took 2 years to review, and right in here you probably should find a whole bunch of them starting to null pros because they're so old they can't be prosecuted.
Right.
Now, I'm not defending those, but that's
No, fair
exactly what those are, right? Null pros.
They are.
Did you ask the district attorney how many, or look up how many null processes that were done in this district during this time?
Not at all.
You see what I'm saying?
No.
You don't see what I'm saying?
I disagree with your premise.
What? Disagree. Go ahead.
Because I don't know what connection you think there is between him telling the court, I can't come to court on that day, and the court having a backlog in cases. By your definition, so remember, this 164...
When he tells the court he can't come that day, that doesn't mean he's on the calendar.
Well, no, every time, every single continuance, allow me to finish,
I'm going to.
is that I recorded was a response from him to the court saying, I can't come on that date. So what I documented were well, really, it came out of 3 documents. But every one of those, it was the court saying, we pick the dates, right? There's a calendar call on this date. There's a schedule for motions and pleas on this date, and then trial on this date. The continuances that I found in his handwriting are all in response saying, I can't make it on that date. I can't make it on that date. I'm going to be gone that week. My legislative duties and obligations require me to be elsewhere on that date. And so what I look at when I see that 164 in 2012, I see him telling the court no. What I see is the court saying, so in 2011, to me, I recorded 93, and it could be 95, it could be 90, it could be 100, could be 93. What I see is he just told the court either A, they asked him into court less often, or he told them no more often. So one of the things we could do, and we can't, obviously...
Well, you disagree with my premise, but you're the one that brought up 2 null pros, 5 here and
Right.
1 here. You're the
Right.
one, so you disagree with my premise, but you don't know if those null pros cases right there are misdemeanor, maybe
No, they're
do.
misdemeanor DUIs.
Misdemeanor
Yeah, they're all
DUIs, right?
misdemeanors. Yeah.
So we just went, and I'm not going to say, look,
No, but-
don't take this wrong. Every
Yeah.
attorney, and I say every, that's a big word. A lot of attorneys that take misdemeanor DUIs may take their time getting them into court.
Sure, of course.
Okay.
Yeah, of course it would. But let me ask you this. If
The only reason on my premise, and I'm going to, I hope you feel I'm giving you the green
Well, I
light.
don't. I'd like me to just let me finish the one
Okay,
thought
go
to
ahead
that.
with your premise.
Is every one of these null process were invited into court in prior years, and he told them no. So it's not that the
Yeah,
court...
but you got no pushback here. That's what my premise. That's what I'm trying to make to you. Don't misunderstand me. What I'm saying here is there's no pushback here. And without going into detail and wasting our time, there was a district attorney here that's no longer here because he never tried a case.
Which pushback? I'm not following.
You said there was no pushback. You're exactly right, because we had a district attorney here, and I'm not saying the one now is pushing back. That's
you
not
mean
my place.
pushback from... Yeah,
right.
Yeah.
So we had a district attorney in this district. All I'm saying to you today is your research is great. You just got, I hate to say it like this, but there's applied research. When you're researching, you come with your finding and then you apply it.
Yeah.
So from here back, and that's all I'm saying to you, and you can tell me you disagree because you said, but that's the, I'm in, your pushback here is 0. We had a district attorney.
Well, actually, the pushback all the way through was 0.
I agree.
Right.
I agree.
Right.
I'll agree.
I saw nobody pushing back.
Okay, I'll agree with that. But what I'm saying here is, from this point, the pushback is absolutely 0. Okay. Now wait a minute. You're going to get to say all the way out. You're going to get to say all the way out. The pushback is 0.
Right.
Let's lay down. The bottom line is we had a district attorney, I think for 8 years, never tried a case. He would come in and sit at a case if it was a big murder case in the TV cameras. That's why on January 3rd, this district, voted in a new district attorney that got handed back here these cases. Now, for my premise, you're saying there's no pushback from there on. But let me ask you a question. Are not a lot of these cases that you looked at, don't they even go back into this 2011, 2010, 2000? Don't they go back into that world?
Well, they do. And so one of the points, I think, and this is a good example where I think we actually agree on all points. We're just trying to decide what's driving the numbers.
Exactly.
So one of the points I was trying to make, and maybe unartfully, is of that 164, for example, all of those are responsive. And so one of these DUIs, for example, I don't know exact one, had been delayed 8 different times from legislative leave continuance, not from the court. So the court on 8 separate times said, we want this case in the court on this date, and he said no. And then they said, how about this date? And he said no. And then how about this date? And he said no. So what's not evident to me is, and I listen, I'll tell you, I fully appreciate the constraint on a small town. All that I think this shows is that when this small judicial district tried to get these cases in, a legislative leave continuance came right after that request and said no. And I think one of the pieces that's lost on all this, and I appreciate, because you've done your due diligence and most don't, you're right, they want to sensationalize it. I want to understand it better, and that's why I encourage people to look closer. But in every single one of these, it was always in response to the court saying, Brian, we'd like you to be in court in 2 weeks on this date with your client for motions and pleas or for a calendar call. And then you go back to the court and say no, and you do that 7, 8 times in a row. And my question would be, would that DUI have null prost if he said, yes, I'll be in court in that week? And one of the questions that I've been trying to wrestle with is, if he didn't have the legislative leave, I call it the wand at this point because it gives the ability to just move the stuff out of the way, would these cases have null prost? How could you push them? Because when I looked at the leave that other attorneys took.
But did he get, now I don't want to say regardless, that's not a good word here. He is Speaker of the House.
Absolutely.
And let's stay focused on that. But he enjoys, I wouldn't say enjoy, bad word, choice words. He has the ability to use the legislative leave law
Right.
like any other attorney in the legislature, Senate or House, right?
Right.
He has
Or even, I think, some staff members as well.
Staff members can do, absolutely,
Yeah.
staff too. But exactly, if they're staff and they're attorneys,
Right.
they can use the same thing. Now, that being said, using that legislative leave, do you know if this is an unusual amount of null pros cases, period?
If you constrain it to for the Speaker of the House, right? Because we start running out of something to compare it to. I reached out to law enforcement leaders in my areas, people that actually run departments, and said, does this sound extraordinary or ordinary to you? I reached out to defense attorneys that actually that are independent of all this in other counties and said that handle DUIs and said, what is your DUI? What are your stats? What do they look like? And I think that, and their responses were all exactly what I think most everybody thinks. And that is that if you're able to get, and I think in Gilmer County, I think it might be as many as 87% of his DUIs fail to prosecute. And one of them is an open container swerving down the road, and the toxicology is solid. So I think the problem here is that it's difficult to tell. I think fundamentally at the core of this is, has an injustice taken place, right? That I think is what we're trying to
I got it.
Right.
I got it.
Right. I think we all are. Or is this just the confluence of a very congested court system with a I think most of people, and you might even agree, with an imperfect piece of legislation, because it seems to be a little ill-defined, right? There's no cap on it. Who determines if it's a legislative priority or obligation? Well, the person that says that they need it. So is it just the perfect storm creating a ripple in it, or is it something that for one reason or the other is actually resulting in injustice being pushed down the road? And I have the benefit of entering in this thing unbiased. I don't know David Ralston. I've never met David Ralston. I had no opinion of David Ralston going into this. I don't know his policies. I don't know his politics. I really don't. And it wasn't my effort to go in and prove one thing or the other. I tell people the reason I went so far down the rabbit hole is because the rabbit hole goes so far down. And what I came out of it was with looking at these, because there's other examples right within this. You've seen a lot of the data. It's just a lot. Where you go, I can't confidently say that null pros would not, I can't definitively because you can't say anything, but you can't say that this 5.5-year-old DUI that got continued 8 times, nobody else can do this but a legislator or somebody under that law. Would that DUI been tended to within the first 24 months? And if you're a client with this seems like a pretty good program, frankly.
You know what? I want to make sure that I keep driving home your research and the work you've done. Okay. as accurate. I'm gonna.
mean,
this is accurate. I want to say that, okay? But there's a level to me, okay? You said you don't agree with my premise. I can give you. We're going to look at a little more.
Well, I don't disagree that. Could I clarify?
But, yes.
I don't disagree factually what you said. I'm not sure how that. Because again, if somebody invites you to the prom 164 times and you say no, you said no 164 times. I don't know why he said no 164 times.
Here's my problem. It's not.
And
with
not
you.
in Gilmer, by the way.
My problem's not with you. Let me tell you
Yes,
my
sir.
problem. Okay. My problem is the reporters that have big cameras and big budgets.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. My problem are the people that call themselves watchdogs that are just so excited that they get to lead and somebody comes and gets them on the news. My problem is, and I'm going to say it like this, my problem is these people that get to be on the radio, okay, that can just discuss this, but you're in the 7th district.
I'm in the 9th.
No, we are.
Oh,
I'm sorry.
okay. I'm sorry.
Right now, you're sitting in the 7th
Okay,
district.
understood.
He's the representative of this district. Now, I'm going to say candidly to you, as a news network,
Right.
okay, we don't look at it different, but we look at, yes, he's Speaker of the House. So we have to loan him to the entire state of Georgia, whether we want to or not,
Right.
okay? Second, he is our representative. So every year I do a post-legislative session interview with him. And in that interview, we talk about things that matter here in
Right.
Gilmer County.
Right, and I've seen those,
Fannin
and that's
County,
good work, absolutely.
And stuff like that. And I will get people say, well, you didn't ask him this and that. No, when he comes in and sits down,
Sure,
he's
your
Speaker
state
of the
rep.
House, he's our state rep, and
Yep.
we talk about what affected us here.
Right.
Now, that being said, but they, all of them have every opportunity, and they know what a rural judicial district is like.
Right.
So what I'm saying is, did Ralston ask for all these legislative leaves? I'm not the one to dispute you today. You did a lot of hard work. But you know what you didn't do? You didn't come. Hey, this is a lot of money, and I don't even want to ask you if you want to share with it what's out of your pocket. But trust me, I've done research
Yeah.
stories, okay?
It's not inexpensive.
Yeah, that's right. You took your time. Did you sit a week in a courtroom? Did you just come up here and
No,
pick
of course
a court?
not. Yeah.
Of course not.
Wasn't
right.
the focus of what I was doing.
Wasn't the focus, but
Right.
maybe it's would have helped you understand.
Not at all. It
Wouldn't have helped
not
you
at all.
understand?
Because at the end of the day,
What did? Wait a minute. Whoa! Wait a minute. Okay. I said jail cases. So if you're to set up here, and let's say David Ralston sends the chief magistrate, or not chief magistrate, chief superior court judge in this district, Brenda Weaver, a letter that says on this day I'll be, so he's not on the calendar. But did you follow to see on that day on the calendar if those cases that did make the calendar went off like they were
Yeah.
supposed to? You did?
no. So here, I think what's lost
What?
in this, and maybe if you'll
Go
allow
ahead,
me
go
for a
ahead.
minute, just
Go ahead.
take a deep breath and
No,
listen to what I would say.
I mean,
Here's-
when I
here's
say
what's-
to you,
yeah.
because I think what I'm doing, and I owe you an apology, I think what I'm doing is you're hearing what I feel on these people that
Yeah.
have the time in downtown Atlanta, and I don't want to espouse that
Yeah.
on you. So I apologize there, but you understand what I'm saying.
I do, but I think you need to listen for a minute to what I'm saying.
I am.
And that is, when the court says to David Ralston, we'd like you in court
Right.
next week
Right.
or in 2 weeks
Right.
so that your client and you
Absolutely.
can be in court. And David Ralston says no. Okay, so the court is not now hearing that case. It's going to get continued, and it might get continued for a whole nother year because it won't make it back on that truncated calendar for a whole nother year.
Exactly.
So here's the problem. And then another year comes around and they say, hey, we'd like you to come in with your client on this date. And he says, no. And it gets continued another year and another year.
I agree with you.
And the problem here is
It
that
drops off.
But here's
And
what I'm
it goes
saying.
back on the calendar a year later.
Absolutely.
It gets to the bottom.
It goes to the bottom.
Absolutely.
And what I did not see here was any discernible effort on behalf of the speaker to go, you know what? This case is now pushed 6 years because of this. I've got to get into case, or I need to get co-counsel to get it into case. Here's where I kept coming back to, and you know, it's difficult because you're absolutely right. I don't like the fact that other people, and I know how it works, they immediately discern what your motives were, and it fits,
Exactly.
and it fits what their motives are, ironically enough, right? I was angry at what I read, no question. Everybody's angry when they read about a child molester case being delayed 9 years, and 44 continuance. You get angry. You have a right to go, I want to understand this better. And all I set out to do is go, well, let me count them. Let me just see how many are out. Well, I told you the first thing I want to do is, is this even real? Right? That was the first goal. So when I look at these numbers, what I see is in 2012, 164 times when the court tried to get him with his client in. Now, mind you, 62 of those during session, so I don't even question that. But 102 of those were outside of the legislative session and outside of the 3 weeks that follow. And for that, I go, at no point during this entire period at all you couldn't get. But one of the questions I keep getting asked is, well, when did he go to court? And I'd like to know that. I'd like to understand, because I can look at these cases and it starts to get heartbreaking, and this is where I get passionate about it, because you see it's all paper and it's all numbers until you meet a person, right? And you see a case and there's a request to get that case into court, and no, legislative duties, out of session. And then there's another attempt a month later, still out of session, no, busy then. And then 2 months later, no, I'm busy. And then 6 months later, no, I can't. And then eight, and it goes on for years, and you think, wait a minute. There's nothing we can do to get this person into court? Nothing? I didn't go into this with the idea that let me prove a point, right? I just didn't. So I guess I'll share this and then I'll stop and I'll give it back to you. The fact that the courts are congested absolutely exacerbate the amount of time these cases get delayed, but what that doesn't do is exacerbate the number of times a legislative leave continuance is issued, unless it keeps popping up during the legislative session, and that would be a problem.
Your words, and not to take out of context, when you heard about the story and started looking, shocked, outrage, and frankly in disbelief. Now when I say discussing the difference of my premise, I would say, as I've said many times, your work here on legislative leave, very good in providing documents, okay? You went and did a press conference, and a lot of people bought in, okay? Bought into what you said with no questions on, well, did you go and see what that case did? Did you go and see, was the calendar clear that day, even though he sent a legislative... What I'm saying is there wasn't that research, which I can understand.
To some extent.
I'm a believer in doing all the research, and that doesn't... Actually, you stepped out to do what research there is. The other people, they have very big investigative budgets, and they could have done the research, okay, that you've done, and they could do the other research and tell the whole circle on the story and let the viewer decide.
Right.
You understand? So I'm not bringing you a premise of my side. I'm bringing another couple things and let them watch your press conference, look at your data, listen to us talk, and when they get done, they decide they don't want him Speaker of the House, they don't want him Speaker in the House. But my thing to you is, not only on legislative leave, I think when you started researching, and let me ask you this, did you not get disgusted with the entire court system? Because if you will look at the entire, what you just scratched the surface of is our entire judicial system that is overburdened. And I'm just going to tell you, that's why I'm very cautious. I don't want to be a defense attorney today, and I can't take up for this, but let me tell you, I know why you're sitting on some of this stuff, and I know why there was no pushback. And I want to say this, and if you want to, and move on to another case, because you closed with a particular one that you said you wanted to highlight, and I'm going to give us a chance to talk about that. But my point is, when you say you don't agree with my premise on some of the things we discussed.
I don't think they're driving the numbers, but I believe what you're saying about the congestion. I don't.
No. I'm not. What I'm saying is when there's a court calendar call, okay, and I'm not getting you to agree with me. I may not articulate it properly, but I know what I speak. So
that is clear. That's clear.
So there's a calendar call. All right. He sends a legislative leave and he's not going.
Right.
But what you and I both don't know, we don't know what ended up with that calendar call.
Yeah.
We don't know what ended up. We don't know if the other cases that made the calendar call were heard that day or pushed back. Now, wait a minute.
Yep.
Or pushed back, because we don't know. Because I have sit in the courtroom and spent 3 hours listening. See, most of our attorneys visit here. I mean, we have attorneys here, but a lot of them visit.
Right.
Because people get attorneys from Atlanta, Gainesville, over in Dalton, whatever.
Yep.
So I have actually sat, in all due respect, and for those out there that are probably upset with me saying this, but I've sat in the courtroom for 3 hours and heard judges go back and forth with the state as they both got their calendars out, and it's got nothing to do with Ralston and when they could come back. And we're in February. Well, we can come back in July.
Yeah, which is the point of the calendar call, right?
Yeah,
we work through that. Yeah.
So because they can't come back because there's a case that took precedence.
Right.
Okay. That's all I'm saying. And I want to say this. There's and I'll leave this to be redundant. The priority calendar, as I said, is jail first.
Yep.
And if you go sit, and that's why I asked you, and I know you didn't, and I don't blame you. If you go sit in court, I hate to call it like this, the orange jumpsuits are coming in first.
Right.
And if you look at our arrest records, we're packed. Sad to say, we're packed. Okay, we're crying.
Right.
So they want them to bond out. Once they bond out, I'm not going to tell you a judge doesn't want to see them back. But if they made a bond, everybody takes a deep breath and gets the other ones.
Right.
Okay, we just had a bad murder up here, and we got another one going on. So that's all I was saying is, even though there's a legislative leave put in, which I agree, your homework is right, we don't know if they would even been on the calendar that day.
And here's what we do know.
What you know, tell me, because you are correct.
This is 100%. We don't know if they would have gotten onto the docket.
Exactly, but they got a legislative leave.
But we absolutely know they didn't, and they couldn't because they were never, ever even walked into court. That's my problem, right? I
got you.
Because it's like saying, well, you don't know, you don't win the lottery if you don't buy, if you didn't buy the ticket, but you're not going to because you didn't buy the ticket. In this case,
it's things like the null pros. Did they get null pros because he kept putting them off, and he's the Speaker of the House? Or did the district attorney? Because I would like for you to go over and ask the district attorney, hey, when you took office, call the district attorney.
But don't you
say,
think
I want to come over and I want to know, when you took office, how many null pros did you do?
Right. Well, you know why it got null pros. It got null pros because it was aged. So the real question is, why was it aged? Not why was it null pros. It's in the language right there in the
court. They're all aged. If you start finding aged, I will tell you this, there's legislative leave. There's some attorneys around this state that Ralston can't hold the light to go by on delays.
So one of the things that would be interesting...
And that I know because I've done the research.
What would be interesting to us both, and I bet, is how do the ages of your misdemeanor DUIs in this county compare to, or his misdemeanor DUIs compare to others? Because at the end of the day, I understand your premise. Mine is that DUI 6 years old because it got 8 continuances? Or is it 6 years old? And that's my premise.
Listen, I think it should be wrong to run a commercial. Or did you get a DUI? Call my office, okay?
Yeah.
I think it should.
But what we're trying to do is determine relationships.
I understand that. I agree with you.
Yeah.
But
and I understand.
But where I'm at is I'm frustrated with the entire system.
Yeah, and so I never answered that question. So I will tell you that it is people need to become more informed on how this works, how underfunded it is, how few heads are, whether if we can agree to say that we need to better understand whether that bears on this. It does in some ways. Whether it bears on the number of continuances he asked for, that's going to be a tall sell for me. But it is frustrated by a congested system.
Well, getting down the road, you understand. We have here in our district. We have 3 Superior Court judges full time.
Right.
Okay. They have to hear other things. We've got a drug court. We've got a veterans court.
I think you need 6 or 7 or 8.
No. I've already asked.
Yeah.
I've already asked for that, and it's got nothing to do with David Ralston. Period.
Yep.
I have sent word said, come on. But you know what
I'll get behind that effort if you want.
I'm serious.
Yeah, it needs to happen.
I'm serious.
Yep.
And what they're going to come back and say, and I think you and I are probably going to enjoy this little part here. They'll come back and tell you, do you realize it cost $500,000 to set up a Superior Court judge in your district, in all the rural districts, and your county is going to be upset because it costs money? you know, we can find money for other things. We'll leave it at that, okay?
Yeah, yep.
But see, we have a lot of visiting judges.
Yeah.
We have to have visiting judges. So we can get there if you want, but like recusal. I know you brought up some of Judge Bradley.
Significant amount of recusal.
But if you'll look, there's a lot of recusal because most of these judges can't hear his case. And that's not basically his fault. That's all over the state. There has to be recusals. You know what I mean? Let's go with this one because I don't want, because you said this is the one you really wanted to look at.
It's really bothered me.
I pulled 2 pages. This one bothers you.
Yep.
Key, State versus Key, aggravated child molestation, enticing a child for sexual purposes, transmitting sexual explicit material to a child under 16. Tell me a little bit about 44 continue. Tell me a little bit about that one there.
Yeah, and I want to be sensitive because
I did pull this up. I just want to read something.
Yeah,
okay?
Fair enough. And let's hope I didn't have a grammar error or a fat finger or anything.
I'm the wrong guy to run that by.
Yeah. You know, Key was compelling to me for the same reasons it's compelling to everybody. And there's, and number one, the sheer volume of it. One of the things that you know, and we've got the indictments here, and I can share them with you after if you haven't seen them already. You know, it's a case where what transpired, these charges, really isn't in dispute. That's not in dispute. For a number of reasons. It's just really not in dispute. And so part of the issue that you have is you've got one individual that has 2 cases in 2 counties, 3 charges.
Cherokee County and Gilmer.
Cherokee County and Gilmer.
Right.
So Cherokee County charged him with aggravated child molestation.
Because it was sent across county?
Well, I'll get... No.
All right, tell me that. Okay.
So basically the 60,000 foot of the case is the defendant had been exchanging sexually explicit text messages with a child under 16. As I understand it, the parents became aware of it, notified law enforcement. Law enforcement looked into it and identified another young man. As they looked closer to that, they realized that the defendant, or at least they alleged the defendant, had transported that individual from this county to his home in Cherokee County, where the act took place that became the basis for Cherokee County's sexual molestation or aggravated child molestation case. Gilmer charged the defendant with transmitting the sexually explicit material and then enticing a child for indecent purposes for transporting the child out of the county to Cherokee County for indecent reasons. So, that became the basis of the 3 charges in the 2 counties. And over the course of those 2 cases, one of which since got dropped, as you well know, this gentleman has, and I would argue, has benefited from 44 total continuances, and I might get this math wrong, the number in the different counties, you might have it in front of you, but I believe in Cherokee County, he received 18 continuances on his case in Cherokee County, and then the other, 15 or 20, however that number comes out, were all received on the cases here in Gilmer County. So that's a case that, at least per the documentation here, is pushing 10 years old. The the aggravated molestation case in Cherokee County, which I think was a warranted charge, was dropped in, you've got it, October
2014.
Is it October 2014?
Yeah, I think I have it here. I think I wrote it down.
Right.
To make sure I had that note.
After a significant number of continuances. And can I see the paper that you have in your hand? That
Yeah, go ahead.
I wrote it in there.
I was going to hand that to you in a minute.
Thank you, sir.
Cherokee County, all I have down is 2014, Cherokee County dropped their case against Derek Key.
Right.
All right. And
a significant number of continuances there.
Okay. So, but when you did the PowerPoint presentation, Cherokee County, now I don't know. If they've dropped that case and their case is closed, did you do an open records for the case?
No, I know what the Noel Pross read, though. Yeah, so I got a chance to read the drop prosecution.
Okay, what did they give your reasoning for dropping?
It's documented, and I'll have to recall this from memory. But it was a number of mitigating factors. It was time. It was it alleged in the Noel Pross that, and some of this is also reported out in the media. It alleged complications with getting the victim to come to court, because at that point I think the case had, this is 2014. The event allegedly happened in before '09, because I think that's when he was charged. So at this point, this gentleman is...
So it's had complications of getting the victim to come to court.
Yeah, absolutely. He's in his 20s at this point, and a myriad of other related muckety-muck. It's an interesting no pros because it seems to hold the victim somewhat accountable in terms of being able to get a hold of him and get him into court. But then there's his statements to the press that said, well, nobody called me. I would have gone to court, but nobody called me. In fact, I think if I recall correctly, he thought it had been dropped because it had been so long. And when he learned it had been dropped, he thought it already had been dropped because nobody had contacted him. So it's safe to say that there's a number of factors that contributed to that being dismissed. I think there's some,
But if the victim did not want to follow through,
yeah.
I don't know. I didn't read the null pros on that. You did not put that up.
Yeah. Well, he was a minor at the time.
I understand.
Right.
So he's a minor at the time.
And then he aged out of that. So I'm not so certain that should be the reason why we don't hold another person accountable.
No, I understand that. But I'm just saying there's also family. You got mom and dad, and I don't know the details. But that case, I understand what you're saying. The victim, they were having problems getting the victim in to, what did you say, make statements or give a statement, or what?
Well,
or what did you say it said?
Yeah,
victim?
It just simply said that they were having trouble getting the victim into court. But the victim publicly said, well, that's not at all the case. And so, to me, this was just an example.
But the null pros came from Cherokee County.
Yes, yeah.
And that was their statement.
Yeah, there's other content in there.
Why did you highlight that one? Why is that so significant? I got the 44. I got the legislative leave. I got the continuance of 44 times based on legislative leave, 9.8 years. But you went on to highlight some other things. Tell our audience what you highlighted here, because this, if you watch your press conference, this is there, correct?
Oh, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So why did you highlight that in this press conference?
Yeah. So part of the back to this case, so that we've got some context, is shortly after he was arrested and a few continuances later, he was rearrested for violating the terms of his bond, right? So that was problematic to me. Number one is we have an individual who is enjoying their freedom, maybe because his case has been pushed down the road, maybe not, right? And is observed at a middle school football game, which is a violation of the bond. It was wrong. He's rearrested.
It was wrong.
Right?
Totally wrong. Against his bond conditions.
Absolutely. So rearrested and then re-released with reiterated terms of the bond. And I think that's out of Cherokee County at the time, that he's subject to that. That he's not supposed to be anywhere where children...
Cherokee County, the one that has already dropped this.
Yeah, well, not at that point.
Not at that point.
Yeah, no, this is years before that. Right. So in that time, so he's obviously rearrested for that, reiterated set of bonds, stay away from where children congregate. So you have countless in what your audience...
Right, so he went to a ball game, wasn't supposed to, bond revocation, got arrested, and now, I'm just saying, I don't know this to be the case, and now he's standing before a judge, and the judge and his attorney's probably standing there, should have been, saying, Your Honor, I want a new bond for him, and the judge granted a new bond.
Clearly, because he was back out again.
Right.
Yep.
Then, because I'm not for sure, I understand the continuances, I'm not for sure what you were showing here, because now, bond violation by a client is not unusual. We don't like it, but when a judge when a attorney argues a bond for their client and the judge grants it, when they leave the courtroom, person can only hope their client doesn't do anything stupid. And those are my words. I'm sorry to put it that way. Yeah. It's like, so why the newspaper? Why did you highlight that?
Well, the reason I highlighted this, number one, is to bring attention to a case that has been delayed entirely too long.
Okay.
And I agree with you. Can you control your client? No, you cannot. But most of us take exception if an individual is arrested for multiple crimes against a child. We'd like that person to stay away from children.
I agree.
And so what I highlighted was in 2012, this individual went down to Haiti to work with children on missions. And I don't imagine, and this was a question I actually asked, but I assume, I didn't make this as a definitive statement, that was probably in violation to a bond, that bond terms that were in place at that time that said, you're not to go and congregate with children, and yet here you are leaving the country, which might very well constitute a violation of that bond, and now you're down and you're photographed with children. I find that problematic. I think most people find that problematic.
But will you agree with me before you go further that that is the responsibility of the state to go to the judge and ask for a bond revocation? I do know that for a fact. It's not the
if they believe
attorney.
there's reasons to.
Right, but you're stating you feel there was reasons to revoke that bond.
Well, I didn't say that. No.
You said you would think that.
What I said is I'm assuming that the terms of his bond did not permit him to leave the country and go to a foreign country and spend time with children.
So I agree with what you're saying. So what you're saying is, if his bond condition was that, which I would think the same thing, that's up to the state to ask the judge to revoke his bond.
Yeah, and at no point did I suggest it should be revoked.
No, I understand. You highlighted it is the only reason.
Yeah, and I highlighted it because I believe that when we have individuals that are not being brought before the courts for the crimes that they have, and this is a particularly aggravated set of circumstances, that this type of thing can happen, as we know it happened in the Harper case as well, right? Where individuals would probably otherwise be incarcerated or have a tighter leash around them from a criminal system perspective. They're out, they're enjoying their freedom. These cases are atrophying over time. The victims are aging out of, aging to the point where they're not sympathetic to the jury, and they don't even want anything to do with this. And meanwhile, an individual that's got these standing criminal charges is in another country, and not a country that's probably good, right? So I highlighted that point because this individual, of course, went back again.
He's getting continuances, and while he's getting these continuances, he's in Haiti on a mission trip that I would think would be against.
And I never suggested that Speaker Ralston could have stopped that because we didn't know whether he knew up until this.
You didn't suggest that.
Yeah.
But I don't remember, in fairness, if it was you or Representative David Clarke when here a Learjet this morning from the Dominican Republic and currently at Erlanger Medical Center Trauma in Chattanooga, they wanted to thank state legislatures and the U.S. Embassy, including Speaker David Ralston. Derek Key arrived, okay? So when this was brought out, which I don't care.
Yeah.
When this was brought out, did you say
I brought it up. Yeah.
Did you say maybe somebody ought to look in? Did you charge, or was that Representative Clarke? And
no,
how that got
that
paid
was me
for?
asking someone to take a look and find out more about this. Absolutely.
Okay, so I would think I'm okay with all the legislative leave, and I'm okay with he's in the Dominican Republic, but
I'm not okay that he's in the Dominican Republic.
No, I'm not okay. He's in the Dominican Republic. I'm okay. You brought that up. What I'm saying.
Okay.
But when it's highlighted in here, because it is a part of an article that you can't take out, but you brought it up and then asked people
deliberately,
to look in, right?
On purpose.
I would like to see because if I'm in the 7th District and I had a family member in another country and I didn't know what to do, I would call my representative. Although this turns out to be his attorney, but this is his representative, first and foremost.
Sure.
And then you know FBI protocol and stuff. Then your representative is going to turn around and call your congressman or your senator and say, "Hey, we have a citizen, an American citizen that's hurt. It needs to come home." Right? Okay. I just want us to both agree on that.
Yeah, but
you can check yourself.
Yeah. Well,
Take the time, find out who paid for the jet.
Yeah.
I don't care.
Yeah.
But
we only partially agree on that because I think he's also the speaker, and so while you can lay claim and say, "Well, he's my representative, he's my speaker." And so the entire state has a right to understand, did the speaker use, which may be okay, did the speaker of the Georgia House of Representatives use his influence to secure a private jet for his client?
I want to say this.
Yeah.
I want to say this. And I want you to come back or call in or something.
Right.
If he did, will you tell me? Because I don't think he's got that power.
I'm asking. I'm not saying.
I know he's.
Yeah.
I know.
So all I'm going to
powerful,
say is I think that everyone.
I don't think the man's got power to arrange a Learjet, but it might just be me. Might be me.
I think one flew him to the inauguration. Which one flew him here? So I think the question comes back to this. And
I don't disagree with you.
I think we have a right to know because here's an individual who is paying him for services. Right?
Find out and let us know.
Let's find out because what your audience needs to know is that after this gentleman recovered, he went back to Haiti.
I'm with you.
So I think remember when I opened up, I know you are. No, we're in violent agreement.
No, I'm serious. I'm with you.
I just want
to
to
know. He had
know.
no business in Haiti, okay? You know, did David Ralston know he left and went? I don't know.
I don't know either.
Did
And you know what I
David
said to
Ralston
somebody?
call a lyric?
Yeah.
I'm going to tell you. First of all, my opinion, now you're a former FBI special agent. You know how several things work. I don't know how things work, much like yourself, but I do know when it comes to the State Department, Speaker of the House of any state of the United States of America is a pretty strong position.
Got to get some attention.
But it doesn't have, they have to call somebody to make something happen.
So here's what I would offer up to this is I've said countless times, maybe it was just a true mensch move, right? Just being a good guy, taking care of my constituent. Here's where things get problematic for all of us because, as I said before, at what point does he stop being an attorney? Because this is a gentleman who's paying him for services.
I agree.
At what point does he stop being the 7th district rep and the state's, right? And I think the optics of this and why I highlighted this is, number one, I think this gentleman probably should not have been in that country twice. But I'm not holding the speaker accountable. I am holding the process accountable for that.
Thank you. The process, because regardless, I agree 100%. You're not wrong on anything other than anybody, when you say pushback, if they didn't have the backbone, that's their problem.
Right.
But all the things you highlighted here, this was in the paper that day.
Yeah.
The judge could have picked it up and said, excuse my French, what the hell?
Yeah.
What's this guy? And could have brought him in, and the state could have said in Cherokee County, no, revoke his bond, put him in jail till he goes to court.
Yeah, I agree with everything.
But you know what I'm saying?
Well, I totally agree.
If somebody didn't have the backbone to do that, that's.
Yeah, well, but you don't want to. One of the things you don't do is you don't blame. I wouldn't blame the lack of enforcement on bad behavior. It just as a philosophical point. Like at the end of the day, you need to self-govern and you conduct yourself to your standards of conduct, and hopefully that fits within the framework. And if it doesn't, then they put you back into it. The reason I brought this up is one of my chief goals as I got into this was I felt, and I still feel this way, that the public, and you heard me say this in the opening, that the public deserves to have a conversation about this based on the material that's out there, not just on the individual. And so, you know what? Here's what I want to hear. I want to hear that the speaker come back and lay out a perfectly logical set of explanations for that Learjet, because I don't know the circumstances.
Maybe he
and you
will.
don't.
I mean,
I hope he does, because I
I
come back
wouldn't
to
doubt he may watch this, and I wouldn't doubt he may have somebody that watches it that tells him, let me move to, and I can't say enough about you coming out here today. Let me move to my closing area, okay? And then what I want to do before we close, if there was something today you want to make sure the viewers heard from you, we're going to give you that opportunity.
Sure.
Now, let me say this. Let me put this out before, let me put this out and then you take it. So, what would you say if some people may feel, what would you say if somebody said to you, somebody may be using you? Okay. No, wait, that's not mine. All right.
Somebody may be using you. Absolutely.
Okay.
Yep.
Somebody may be using you. Somebody may be pulling you down the road. They want you to go for other reasons.
Sure.
Now, first of all, this is my opinion, audience. I don't think any of the Atlanta media care about the victims. Okay. I have a gentleman here with me today I feel may care about the victims. That's up to you to say, up to them to decide. I'm not going to judge him. But Atlanta media, no. Because let me tell you something. I know the Amanda Mosier case as well as anybody.
Yep.
Guess what? That Amanda Mosier case has been around for years.
Yep.
Guess what? They did. Now, if you're furious, when you go and start looking stuff up, and you say, I'm furious, how do we let this happen? Have you said to the Atlanta media, you ran stories. All of you did 4, 5, 6 years ago.
2012,
How
2013.
How did you people let this happen?
Yep. Yeah. Amanda's story is heartbreaking, and you're right.
I know the whole story.
As we both do. Yep.
But what I'm saying is, now let me say, and I'm not going to take Representative Clarke to task, but most of the representatives down there, including Clarke, They know this. Okay?
Yeah.
So I'm going to give you this big ball and I want you to run with it, okay?
Okay.
So let's say you're being, I feel you may be, somebody's using you. So why did this situation that is so drastic to our system,
Right.
and is disgusting, and people are appalled, and justice delayed is justice denied. Why did a group find it the perfect time, right in the middle of the 2019 legislative session? Why then? Why is, to my recognition, why is Matt Gertler, Representative Gertler from the 8th District North here, the only Republican representative, if I remember, that voted no for him Speaker? Why is the guy that's sitting at the press conference, why didn't he vote no then for Speaker of the House? These big questions, why then?
Right.
What say you? What say you? Because I'm going to tell you something. Somebody that does this kind of research, you think some things out. So in the middle of the legislative session, my words, all of a sudden, this guy's despicable, needs to be removed, has a resolution, 9 people ask him to leave. The Atlanta media jumps all over it.
Right.
And they find former FBI special agent Derek Somerville to out of pocket do this kind of research. What say you? I'm sorry, I keep going, but there you go. That's my platter I want to give you.
I think it's a fantastical take on a rather likely less impressive version. Your first question was, do I feel like people are taking advantage of me? I'm acutely aware that almost everybody that's engaged me on this topic has their own motivations for it. Right? The victims have motivations. The political group, by and large, seem to have motivations, and they vary within them. The different members of the media have their motivations, and what I've tried to do is distance myself from all of it except for the victims. I don't care what everybody's motivations are. I simply don't care, and it's a difficult thing to explain to people when you say you don't care, because they go, well, what do you mean? I literally mean I do not care. I read a story in a paper that upset me. I read a story that suggested that a system that I believed in my entire life, that I took oaths for, that I defended, that I put my life on the line for, may not quite be, and I'm not naive, and I don't think anything about...
I don't think you are, don't take it to be naive.
And so I get that there's a fair amount of pliability in our system, if you will. But this was something that I thought was so egregious to anything I actually believed. And then when I looked at the victim story and I thought, well, this can't possibly be, right? It just couldn't be. And so it struck a nerve with me. I think there's a few things that took place. Are there individuals that are using this as an opportune series of events? For sure there are, and there always will be. Are they the reason why it came to light? I don't think so. I think that... I think that reporting, I don't know who's behind the reporting, but the reporting fired me up. It fired up everybody that I knew, right? Independent of all those people, it fired up everybody they knew. And
some of the reporting's misleading, and don't take that wrong.
Sure.
And I told you you're going to get that.
Yeah.
See, you got fired up. I know people that get fired up. I admittingly tell you that I know people got fired up. Yeah. I agree with you.
Yeah.
I apologize for interrupting.
No, you're fine. But I don't know what other people's motivations are. And I knew full well as I was looking into this, at some point there's some mass that gets built around it. You realize, okay, this is going to be a little more than you just poking into this to see what it is. Because at some point you're going to have to share this with somebody, because it's a complicated logistical effort, right? I mean, effectively, what I did was just take massive amounts of geography and lots of files and lots of papers and pulled out all the ones that were relevant to this topic and put it in one spot.
Right.
That's effectively what I did, because I wanted to enable you. I wanted to enable my neighbor. I wanted to enable everybody who had an interest in this the opportunity to go look at the data. Right? That's what I wanted to do. Say, you know what? We deserve a conversation based on the facts as best as we can pull them together. And that was done in a relatively truncated period of time, which is why I said, others should look at this. Maybe I did miss something. I most certainly missed something. But at the end of the day, I had the benefit to talk to Amanda Mosher, right? And it's a pretty heart-wrenching story, and she's a very sincere and compelling individual. And I had And as you start to look at some of these, you go, you know what? Somebody's been trying to give voice to this for a long time. It goes back to 2005. And the incident was 2005. It got a little
It was on
airplay.
Highway 515.
Yeah, it's brutal.
And they were going very, very slow because they were having car problems.
Correct.
And there's an if you go up 515, there's a couple of these.
Right.
And when you come down just a little bit and go up, it's not a major hill, but they're long plateaus.
Right.
And they go down a little and up. And when this individual behind her, because she thought she could make it home, when this individual behind her came into sight, was running 65 because the speed limit is 65, 70 mile an hour, and boom.
Yep.
Guess what? I was there that day.
Oh goodness. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And my take on that case is that
that's the reason the only reason I bring that up is when you say you're passionate about something. I know Amanda Moser's case, and that's why I get upset with the big media groups that have big.
Right.
We're a small business.
Mm-hmm.
I'm enjoying my time with you.
Thank you.
Our family is a small business. You came in and you walked in the Small Business USA. What, you met my wife?
Yep.
Met our producer. You're in Small Business USA right here.
Yep.
We are small business when people talk about it. And that being said, we don't have, as a news network, I don't have an investigation budget.
Right.
I have to do it myself, stay up, no jokes. You took out of your pocket. But we have some media that have big investigative teams, big investigative budgets. I feel I'm really not letting you answer that, but I just want you, I want you to know we're coming from the same place.
We absolutely are. And I respect what you do. I respect most of the different individuals that are engaged in this discussion, because in one way or the other, what I've tried to do is partner in a way that allowed me to fulfill what I took on as a personal mission, and that was I'm going to do my very best to, in as unbiased as a way as you can, right? That's difficult to do because you start to formulate opinions, but to not allow that bias to guide what I was doing, right? And what I did was very mechanical. It just was a lot of work. Identify and copy and record, right? Identify, copy, and record.
Old cases. When you were doing that, I was thinking, my God.
It was brutal. Yeah,
you've had.
Oh, that's a whole other discussion, right? Yeah. Because if we're going to invest in the system, let's get everybody automated so we can have complete transparency on all this. But at the end of the day, I knew that if I rolled this out, I wanted to roll it out as broad as I could. So I wanted to be as accurate as I could. I really worked extremely hard to make sure that everything was detailed and accurate. But I wanted to make sure that the people understood that this is yours. And one of the things that I found very impressive at the time was I can go into, and everyone in your audience can.
It belongs to you. I like to tell people
this is mine.
Absolutely.
Now you might still get some. I think you've experienced pushback on public records that were actually yours, but I not your records, but our records.
Right.
So I was so impressed with the idea. Not good, not bad. Just impressed that wait a minute, they're not anyone's records, they're everyone's records. So I wanted to try to help put all that out there in one format so that everybody could. And I told somebody the other day, and I appreciate you giving me the time to say this, I would love nothing more than to not be in this conversation. I would love nothing more than this conversation to not be necessary. I would love nothing more to not see my face in another Facebook feed or on the media. I don't like it.
Let me ask you this, though, and I say this is the only words I have, okay, to frame this up. Since you've done this and started talking to media, when I say real, am I the real first pushback on this to dig a little bit? Which I'm going to say my words, you've done very well today, with us discussing it. But am I some of the first pushback?
This is the experience, which, by the way, I so appreciate because we do this more, and we'll come to better conclusions, right?
Got it.
Right. So
absolutely.
So I appreciate it, number one, and unequivocally, it's the most contentious discussion I've had on this.
Well, I believe in healthy.
Well done.
I hate to say debate, but I have moderated several debates,
yes.
and I like a healthy discussion where both parties are going to bring a side, and I'm not bringing somebody's side or defending somebody. But I want those out there to see. But I want to go back to my closing when I say that you've asked Speaker Ralston to resign. So let me put this in a box.
Well, can we put some context? Because I got cornered. That's the first press conference I've ever been at. I have opinion on this, and I went
Well,
into
you did a very good job.
I've never. Okay,
I mean,
well,
you did a very good job.
so
'Cause
first time I've ever stared back.
I
at
was
the press.
looking, I'm saying, I got to find out what exactly he did with the FBI, because
Not
he
this.
did a pretty good presentation.
Not this at all. I appreciate that. And so it is, and I'm not looking for sympathy points here, but it is the first time that I've ever done that. And I had gone into that hoping to lay forth what I had and then hand everybody the stick. Give everybody, for your audience, give everybody the data, right?
Right.
That was my objective. I didn't mind to take procedural questions, but I didn't want to offer up an opinion because my opinion was irrelevant in my perspective. I was trying to lay out, the data, and I got pushed very hard on it. My opinion over the time of this came to the conclusion personally that this is going to continue to be a pretty significant distraction, and it's probably in the best interest of all of it, these cases, because there's a fair amount of backlog case. It's probably in the best interest at the end of the day, given everything that we see, in my opinion. It's a good time for him to step down and focus on the balance of his life outside of that role. Maybe not as the representative, but maybe as a speaker. So I didn't intend to release that, but I got cornered repeated. You were in there, you heard it, So I'm sorry on that.
I know they put a lot of pressure, and when I say that, on you to say that. It's just like I watch media, and I study the media in the morning, and I watch some networks that I don't agree with that just don't want to stop until somebody say, yes, the president needs impeached.
Right.
Okay? So I understand what you're up against, and I'm not saying you don't change your feeling, but where I'm going to go with that is you have asked for him to resign. Now, I, for one, have watched the individuals, and that's why I asked you, because one particular watchdog has a website, Ralston Resign, and I know that you do it for no money, these people do it for money. Let's just put it like that. Another person that highlights, a lady that highlights everything you do, I understand why that individual doesn't like Nathan Deal. It doesn't like that the judicial building is going to be named after Nathan Deal. So we're going to leave people, and I understand the whole background on that.
And I don't.
I do. I know the media. I know that I always got to be careful because I don't know when I'm going to get a letter from their attorneys. But I know when you put the AJC's investigative arm with WSB, that they are now a joint. They're coming out of the same pocket, and they are flexing their arm with showing how their muscle of what they can do on investigation. David Clarke, I've asked if he's going to run for Congress. I've asked if he's going to run for state Senate. What exactly his reasoning is, I've tried to ask him, and the 9 that have signed the resolution.
Right.
Now, there's a group, if you'll go on Facebook, that they don't want Ralston. See, I would have, let me just say this. What you've done, thank you for your time. We need more citizens doing what you've done. Okay? There's some research you need to bear out. How many attorneys are in State House? How many staff members are attorneys? How many Democrats took legislative leave? What's the numbers? Okay, and that's not far beyond your ability. It's far beyond your time you have to put towards it.
No, it's not. It's actually, but it's beyond the scope that I intended. I'm interested.
The scope you intended. I agree with you.
Interested in this man's use of legislative leave.
But you have some research that needs bared out.
Not that it doesn't bear on this though. It doesn't.
I agree.
Right. It won't move the numbers down. It won't make.
It doesn't move the numbers. It doesn't move the numbers.
Yeah.
But did this one use it 32 times? Did this one use it 89 times? I mean, is this Democrat?
So part of the challenge that I have with that, if I can interrupt.
You stayed focused. I'm going to say that. All I think,
because I'm holding one person accountable.
Right. You're holding one exactly. Yeah. All I'm saying is, you stayed focused. I respect that. You didn't lose your focus. Mm-hmm. But the people that have the time, staff, can bear out. You asked them basically. I mean,
absolutely.
You asked them the other day. You told them. You said something. Correct me. You said, hey, I'm asking you, go check this out. Take what I've done, you people, and go check it out, basically, is what you said, right?
That's effectively how I opened it. Yeah.
But you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And you told them to go bear it out.
But
some asked you some questions at the end, and you said, that's not what my focus was. Mm-hmm. So go ahead.
Yeah, and I have an old school view, I guess, on this. Everybody else could be doing it. They could be doing it even worse. But I'm not looking to equivocate or balance one against the other. What I'm looking at is how many of these cases were delayed? How many times were they delayed? Why were they delayed? Why do we have continuances that cite periods of time that are not actually legitimate? Why do we have contradictions in others? There's a number of questions in here that speak to either a true comfort with it so the accuracy starts to fall apart, but there's questions that need to be answered in here. And I think every one of us are ultimately held accountable for the decisions that we make. So my perspective is we should look at this. There's a lot of questions, and the speaker can solve a lot of this. He went on your own show. You interviewed him recently, and
yes.
And he said, I did one legislative continuance between 2006 and 2010 under the revision of the law. I've got a copy of 45 that I'll leave with you today, or 49. So he looked you in the eye and said, I did one.
Under the revision of the law.
Yes, and under the revision of the law, I've got 49 copies that he submitted. Not one, but 49. And I think that I'm going to leave those with you, and you can go back and say, well, you said one. I've got copies of 49. Those are questions that have surfaced out of that. And I think right now, at the end of the day, for me, is number one, as I said before, I have nothing personally against David Ralston. I don't. But he's chosen to be in a very significant position of leadership. There's a fair amount of intimidation that exists around him, and I think that needs to be addressed.
I think you're hitting a point there of what I would feel. I'm the kind of person, I'm going to come straight to you.
Yeah, well, you want answers.
I'm going to say to you, Mr. Speaker, I want you to be Speaker of the House. I'm not happy with you. Don't like the way you handle it. I think you're a bully. I think you're mean.
Yeah.
I think you won't let my bill go on the floor. But then I think these victims have presented quite an opportunity to me for politicians, not Derek Somerville, for some politicians.
Oh, yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
I think they've created a possibility because don't you question, you're the kind of person that questions something. That's why you were sitting home and read this. Mm-hmm. Don't you question why they brought this up in the middle of a legislative session, in the middle of our governor's first legislative session? Did you ever thought about that?
Oh, why the media did?
Yeah. Why?
Yeah.
No, not the media. So for Derek Clarke and them?
David Clarke.
David Clarke?
Yeah.
Derek. David Clarke? You ever question that?
I question David.
The center of the center of the legislative session. Why not get the legislative session over instead of maybe what I would call grandstanding?
I can't speak for David Clarke, but I would offer this. I'd like to think I'm a reasonably decent, not judge a character, but I can get a sense of motivation. I believe, and David Clarke doesn't need me to speak for him.
You had the nerve to come up here. I'm being very rude. You had the nerve to take my phone call. You had the nerve to text.
Yeah.
David Clarke hasn't had the respect to return a phone call from me. So let's you're going to have your view, and I'm going to have my view.
Yeah, I haven't sensed. I would not have sat up there with him if I thought that if he wasn't being guided by his faith, by his heart, because he had a lot to lose, and it had been a much more politically expedient thing for him to do not to stand up. I'm generally disappointed with the lack of discussion within the legislature, but then maybe there is discussion that we're not privileged to at this point.
Two things.
Yes, sir.
You've asked Speaker Ralston to resign.
Somebody asked me what I thought, and I said I think it's time for him to probably resign.
Okay. And then the other day, I was watching the 6 o'clock news when the story came on, and I can't quote it because it's off memory, and the speaker said something to the reference of, they never talk about me being speaker. Mm-hmm. They never discuss my legislative ability to get things done.
Right.
They only talk about, my law practice. Is this not the quote? And basically said, they never say I'm a bad speaker. Maybe they just think I'm a bad attorney, right?
Yeah.
Is his statement. So, this session, let's separate out this session. We got, whether you agree or not, we got medical marijuana passed. We've got Medicaid waivers. Okay. Mm-hmm. Now, I didn't even ask you where you live, but up here we're not far from a rural hospital that closed,
Okay.
which our Speaker of the House, our representative, was instrumental in Piedmont putting what's called a small hospital. I forget what we called it, but anyhow, we got Medicaid waivers this year. The governor, it's hard to go into that. Got the heartbeat bill, and I don't care. I tell the whole entire world, I'm pro-life. I'm one of the most pro-life guys you ever met. Okay, and I don't know how you can get more pro-life and extend it. You're either pro-life or not. But I like to enunciate how pro-life I am. So the heartbeat bill, I said on my show, and I yelled, and I had right here where you're sitting in that chair, candidate Brian Kemp at that time in the same chair you're at today, and I looked at him and I said, if elected, will you sign a heartbeat bill? And he said yes, okay, in this room, and I know he told others. Ralston has to bring these bills to the floor. The heartbeat bill came out of the House. We have a new voting system. I mean, we have several things that have taken place in the session.
Sure.
So, why are they calling for his resignation as the Speaker? Now, he has said, and this is what I want to say to you, he has said on my show twice. I went to Atlanta. I don't know if you realize I went to Atlanta and interviewed him. There's 2 interviews.
Yes,
one in Atlanta,
Yep.
okay, and one here in this office. He said in Atlanta he was going to have a independent group review the legislative bill law,
Right.
and try to make something happen this year. Doesn't mean it's an end all, but try to make something happen this year and a change. He was not going to take any more cases until he cleaned these up. He was getting them immediately on the calendar now. So if he changed the legislative leave law, at least made that effort to get it started, and he's made a commitment not to take any more cases, and he has these cases on the calendar.
Right.
Are you not satisfied with him saying, okay, I see what you're saying, and I'm going to make it happen?
Yeah, I'm not even remotely satisfied with it. We don't even get into the ballpark of me being satisfied. The amendments that were proposed by the group that he picked.
This is HB, I got it right here, HB 502.
502.
Right? Yeah, HB 502, I have it right here.
We would have been better off to not have done anything with it and actually had a group of individuals that could sit around the table and have a substantive conversation about it. I think what we did is we added, more. I didn't see more restriction. I think that the chief point of restriction that was articulated in that amendment is, well, now the judges and the victims and the prosecutors will have the ability to push back.
They have the ability, when you say you're not, that we have it here, whether to grant or deny the continuance or stay, they have ability to push back.
Well, they have the ability to push that, but who's going to make the ultimate decision? I believe probably the judge. And the judge in every single one of these cases has always had a recourse, as one judge in Towns County did, to say, nope, stop, you're going to do this.
But that wasn't the legislative leave law at that time.
But this is, people go there and they say, well, but that wasn't but it absolutely was to the attorney, because if you look at what he's telling the attorney, I'm busy doing other things.
I agree. An attorney, just in, when I say, let's just let it out there, the length of time of the case has been pending. An attorney, the opposing counsel or the judge can push back.
Right.
The length of delay that such stay or continuance will cause in the resolution of a case
will be considered.
The nature of the General Assembly duties that require continuance or stay. So there's a lot of them here that you brought up today that, let's just say, like I said, in the Cherokee County case,
right,
the judge could have pushed back and the judge could have said X.
Yep.
And it's the law now. Such other factors determined to be relevant is determined harm to the rights of the party or interest of justice in granting a or denial of request for continuance or stay, absence a ruling by the court denying continuance or stay certified by the member, of this, such continuance shall be considered. Says this.
It's meaningless.
Not meaningless.
Yeah.
Why is it meaningless?
It's meaningless because, number one, do we actually need to add language that says we're going to take into consideration the victim's rights in making this decision? Why aren't we doing that now? We have a Victim's Bill of Rights. At any point in this process, we have a judiciary that is separate from the legislature for a reason. At any point in any of these cases, why weren't we taking this stuff into consideration? Just allow me. So to think that now we can go back to the people and say, oh, by the way, I heard you, and although I did nothing wrong, I'm going to change the thing that I didn't do anything wrong with people that I appoint, and I'm going to give the judges the power to do something they always could have done all this time. We already have examples of individuals going back to the court in that motion saying, hey, judge, I need help, and saying, listen, he keeps putting this off because of his legislative duties. That one attorney says, we have an opportunity here to make it clear that legislators can't abuse this, and the judge granted that order. My problem with this is that it doesn't, at the end of the day, solve anything at all.
Anything's a big word, so don't take that wrong.
Okay, fair enough.
It closed, but does it not close some loopholes?
No.
Why not? Because you just said, and I agree with what you said. You said,
these people have
we're
rights
talking about, they had those rights all along. Okay?
Yeah.
But what is one of the arguments you hear out there when people say they had the rights all along? Well, the district attorney, and let's not just say here, all across the state of Georgia, whoever the district attorney is,
right.
The district attorney, the judge, they're never going to tell these lady legislators, men legislators no.
Right.
They're never going to do it, right? Mm-hmm. And yeah, it's Ralston said it, so they're not. Does he not take for every legislator and every legislator? Not him, mm-hmm. Because my understanding, unless he's misled me, and I don't know that, so I don't want to put that out there. But my understanding, HB 502, he was not involved in. That's what he says publicly. He said it right here. He was not involved in. There was a group that put this together.
Who picked the group?
I got it. I got it. Okay, but
you're going to pick the group to audit your company.
I got it. I got it.
So
don't take this wrong. Welcome to the real world of politics.
I know.
And you can take David Ralston's name, out of it. Trust me.
I would offer this.
Wait a minute. Let me say this. So what I'm saying is, does it not now take that argument, and when you say they had rights all along, I agree, but shift that argument to the state?
No.
Because they can say no.
I think number one is
I would take 502 if I was a judge of the state.
Yeah.
And I would implement it. Let's put it like that.
You're a superior court judge. You have the ability to control your courtroom.
Got it.
Right. So and I think we're in agreement. So what I see in this is I see a relatively toothless attempt to say I heard you and I'm going to react to it. And I'm not. And it may have been a genuine effort, but it's a toothless effort. When you actually get into this, and when you actually look what you have done, and you really look at this, and you look at the pattern of behavior, and you look at the responses to this, and you look at the systemic problem, where's the cap? Like, where's the cap that says you can't extend it any right?
I will say this does not need to be the end all.
No, I understand.
It needs to come back next year.
But what I don't like about this is, if I may, Brian, is I don't like that it's offered up as a show that I heard you and I did something. I don't think that's the right course. I said this to somebody the other day. We're a very forgiving citizenship, right? We are. We're the citizenry here. We're very forgiving. We're extremely forgiving, and we have short memories. And what has not come out yet is to say, you know what? In hindsight, in light of numbers that he may not even been aware of these numbers, by the way. It's very possible that he doesn't have a grasp of what these actual numbers were. You know, in the fray of my responsibilities, in the midst of my commitment to my state, I realized that I allowed my practice to slip. In doing that, I affected people, and I affected the system, and I affected justice. And that was wrong, and I shouldn't have done that. And you know what, people of Georgia, from the bottom of my heart, I'm sorry. And I'm going to take substantive measures to make that right again. I've had 10 long years in this role, and I think I've done a good job, and I hope you think I've done a good job too. But I'm going to go back to my North Georgia practice, and I'm going to focus on this system that's broken, and I'm going to take care of the people that maybe suffered at this unintentionally. And I want you to be part of that effort. And thank you very much. And people would absolutely get on board and say, okay, you've just asked for forgiveness. You're taking a real step to address this, which is probably time to move aside, because this is going to be a pretty material distraction for some time. And focus that energy and the 30 years of experience on that system, and let's fix that system. But the problem is people keep saying, well, he's an attorney. He's a speaker. you can't be one or other at any given point in time. Every time that he walks in the room, he's the Speaker of the House of Georgia.
Yeah, but Georgia's going to have, and let me say this for argument's sake, Georgia's going to have a Speaker of the House.
Sure.
He or she is going to be from a district, or, as a representative first and foremost.
Right.
Their peers are going to elect them Speaker of the House. Okay. The bottom line is, if they're an attorney or not, every time they walk in, they're Speaker of the House. Okay. Right. That's just the fact of the matter. Okay. Mm-hmm. And then when you start breaking down, because you're not a politician, you said that, and you're not interested in politics, but if you start breaking down the political side of it, there's two judgments. There's attorney, maybe he needs to stop taking cases altogether.
Right. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah. And we should look at that. We should look at the caseload and see what
and
he did.
And then there's Speaker of the House performance.
Right.
So on that, when you're asking, well, should you not be Speaker of the House, I ask you this. Did you call David Ralston and ask to come by his office and
not
sit
at
down?
all.
Why not? I mean, I'm not... I don't want to say you're not that kind of person. I don't want to say who you are.
Yeah.
You understand?
Sure.
But me, I'm that kind of guy. I call and say, I want to come sit down and talk to you. I found this, and I'm going to give you, look at me and give me your argument.
Yeah.
But why didn't you go talk to him?
Well, I'm not a reporter, number one. Right?
I understand.
Right, that's not my job. It's he can choose whether or not he wants to address this. At no point, and I didn't ask to become a reporter. That's not the point here, right? It was to get this information out and let's have a conversation about it. I think that part has probably been achieved. As I said before, I don't have any personal animus to him, but I do think that in light of all of this, you in the military, you have a general, and in this respect, that's very much what he is. He's a general officer in a large, complex government organization. In this state, he's a general. He's a high-ranking general. There's a certain level of conduct that you just simply make sure that that is in keeping with that pay grade, right? That's just what you do. So I would reject the idea that says, well, when he's an attorney too, so he's not the speaker. No, he's an attorney who happens to be the speaker. He needs to be very sensitive to how he wields that wand, and I don't see the sensitivity here, and that creates this backlash, and that's the real issue. Is if we don't have the legislative boundaries established to a point that says, if it's you, hey Brian, you should have to explain exactly why it is that you can't be in court, because I need to be informed with particularity why that is, right? I need to know why. Why is that? I need to know, as is most law, for it to be constitutional, in this case, it can't be in perpetuity. There has to be some measure that stops it, and right now there's none. There's nothing that says you can't do this for 25 years. You have a case right now that's 17 years old. Right? So there's nothing that has anybody that we have yet to say, hey, can we have a conversation about the constitutionality of this? Because as you well know, it may be legal, but it may not be constitutional. And that's a conversation we should be having. But I think to come back and handpick a bunch of people that get on a conference call and make a couple of recommendations, I don't know what the motive is, but I think that came up short, and I don't think that addresses this.
I don't want to say that the number of legislative leave requests here are appropriate. I don't want to say that. I don't want to come down on that side and say this is okay. I'm going to leave that to the citizens out there and the viewers to decide. But here's what I want to say. We have turned in the state of Georgia somewhat, and I can hear the yelling through the camera now, the people that are going to yell, but we've turned in the Speaker of the House position almost into a full-time job.
Yeah.
We have turned that into a...
It probably should be articulated as well.
Yeah, but we've turned it into almost a full-time job.
Yeah.
But it's not a full-time job. Representatives are elected every 2 years. So they're not going to end their profession if they're a builder, a realtor, or an attorney, because on any given, the speakers had 3 different primary opponents, and on any given time, somebody can be, voted out, and you may need to be that builder, real estate, because the citizens said you don't go back.
Right.
So you're not going to have people get rid of their law practice. They're not going to do it because in 2 years they could be gone. The speaker, we've turned it into almost a full-time position. The state of Georgia, the requirements are what has to be done now.
Right.
We're one of the fastest growing states in the United States.
Yep.
And with that being said, the Speaker can't have a full-time job because he's not elected by the people. So if you look at the state constitution, the Speaker's elected by his peers.
Right.
So you can't have a full-time job. So you and I could say, let's make Speaker Lieutenant Governor's full-time job. Why? Because the citizens, the voters of Georgia voted for him.
Right.
And he's a right? That Lieutenant Governor's a actually, Speaker of the House, he's not a constitutional officer. He is a constitutional representative that's been elected. You follow me, right?
Yeah, his colleagues.
So the governor, he's not going to continue being an attorney if he is, because that's full-time job. Lieutenant Governor.
So let me ask you this.
Speaker Ralston, let's say when we're talking, let's say we're solution. Forget Ralston.
Yeah.
We say Speaker of the House needs to be full-time job. Then you would have to turn it into a statewide race. Yeah. You see where I'm going?
I do.
So there's some things.
But you bring up a really good point that I want to inject here, is that what about the individual today or 5 years ago who's a CPA and wants to be the Speaker of the House? What legislative provision allows him to defer his tax work at the beginning of the year
to the IRS and say, I can't get it in because
there's
April
none.
5th. Right, I agree.
Or the house builder, to your point, or to the physician. Maybe we want a neurosurgeon one day that's going to be. So I think part of it.
Every state in the United States
Absolutely.
now, Derek, has legislative leave for their representatives on a state level.
Well, I think we know why that is, though, right?
Right,
Because
but we're not doing something in Georgia. We might need to do something as what you and I would agree is a correction.
Yes.
So I think your example of a CPA.
Well, and the reason I bring it up is that we make, and yes, it's not surprising that lawyers have a large influence in lawmaking, right? So that's not surprising. But we do make an allowance for a profession in the state. And so it supports what you're saying, is that, well, then let's make the role full-time, number one. Number two is, one of the things that I find extremely problematic, and I don't know how you are on time here, but is the amount of intimidation that surrounds this individual. The number of people that have warned me, the number of people have told me, watch out for your safety, the number of politicians that won't stick their head out of their holes because they're going to lose their ability to represent their district. And I think those are well-intended. Hey, listen, I need funds, I need my legislation to pass. And I think part of that is should an individual be able to sit in a role for 10 years? No successful company in America has a CEO sit there for 10 years. So I think there's a number, and I only raise that as just topic to say we should revisit the role. We absolutely should. And there's a number of pieces to this conversation that should continue, but it shouldn't stop us from looking at this and saying, was this par for the course, or was this an abuse?
But you separated it in all due respect, and I agree with what you just said. The legislators that have expressed those views and concerns with you, that's why they don't want him to be Speaker of the House. Not
yeah, and like we
so
talked about before, what
I'm saying. But you understand where I went with it.
Well,
the ones that they have what they claim, and they should debate that on the floor of the House. And I mean, I guess that's why I love Parliament. I don't know if you've ever. I'm veering off, but I love to watch Parliament. But that's exactly what you said. They should come up and say, "That's why."
Yeah.
Not take a victim.
Yeah.
And keep using the word victim. Now I'm going to leave it at that. Is there something today that we didn't discuss that you wanted to make sure our audience knew? Something today that you wanted to share with the audience you didn't get a chance to share the other day in the press conference we left out?
No, number one, I appreciate your time. Number two, I appreciate the constructive discussion and debate, because great ideas always come from that. Right? That is the type of discussion we have to have, and that's the type of discussion that I'm interested in helping promote, helping enable. That was the motivation from the get-go. You asked a couple of questions that I was glad to clarify in terms of who was behind this and was I funded, and all that's just nonsense. None of that's possibly true at all. And one of the things that I wanted to make sure that I addressed, which we did in a number of different ways, is, again, I'd prefer for us to not to have this conversation. This is not a place that I want to be. I don't want to be out in front of cameras. I don't want to be in a press conference in that environment. It's not not part of what I have intended for my days or my weeks or my months. As we said before, I'm certainly interested in politically what's happening because I'm interested in the leadership of our state. I'm interested in where it's headed. I've got teenagers and I've raised my kids in this state. I want them to stay in this state. So I think I have a vested interest, like we all do, in these decisions. But there is no motivation beyond trying to vet this out, get this information out there, and have a healthy discussion, and make sure that discussion is based on facts in as unbiased a venue as you can. But to your point, you can certainly feel the tug of war going on when you're dealing with something that's both politically charged, it's emotionally charged. It obviously plays to media and the importance to them of getting stories out that actually get clicks and get followership and viewership. What I hope at the end of this, Brian, is we'll continue to have these discussions. They'll be substantive, they'll be honest. If they have to be uncomfortable, they'll be uncomfortable, but we'll come out of it as a better state for it.
We want to know because folks out there, now you've requested I call you Derek.
Please.
Right, I know. I don't want them to feel I'm disrespecting you today. But Derek, when we first started, you see on the screen, Derek Somerville, former FBI agent. I said to him jokingly, if we don't put that up, they won't know who he is because if you, every media outlet last Wednesday ran with that. So do you mind me asking a little bit like, and if the document is sealed and secret and we can never know, we're going to respect that. But what your special agent former, can we ask what you used to do?
Yeah, I'm happy to share.
A little bit of what you did with the FBI?
Yeah, the first thing I tell everybody is everything interesting about me is former and past tense, and that's a sad state of affairs. So I joined the FBI after 9/11. Same reason a lot of people did at that time as a former Marine, and I felt like that was a direction I wanted to go. I was amazed that I got in. So I was a special agent assigned in St. Louis in the early 2000s. I worked public corruption, not dissimilar to the discussions that we're having today. Work along this time frame. I worked a little counterterrorism as well. And then we started having babies and made a life choice and left the Bureau. So it was an early part of the 2000s that I did it. It's not the predominance of my experience. But it was an amazing privilege and something that if it wasn't for other reasons, I'd be doing today.
Well, let me say this as we close. Once again, thank you for your service. We appreciate you very much. And I've enjoyed getting to know you today.
Good.
Being redundant as many times as I did watch it live and watching your press conference. You're somebody I was looking forward to meeting. And I as you go away, I can say I appreciate all the hard work you've done, and hopefully more citizens will, let's take names out, will just get more involved regardless of who it is in their district and look at what's going on in our government today. You agree?
I would love this effort to inspire just one more person to go one step further and take a step closer to the data and the facts and promote a conversation. And I appreciate what you do. I appreciate the invite. That's why I came up. And I hope we get the opportunity to have this discussion, and maybe we'll evolve it into the broader justice system that we talked about earlier.
I think there's some other things we may look into.
Sounds like a plan.
Derek, I appreciate you very much. Thank you. Folks, we've been here with Derek Somerville, former special agent, FBI, but has done an extensive research on legislative leave in general, and particularly Georgia House Speaker David Ralston. So we're going to go, and we thank you for joining us for this extended discussion.